So Cube asked me back in, I think it was 96 or 97. He's Chris, we want to do another Fridays, man. And I was just like, nah, I don't want to do another Fridays.
$12 million could not bring Chris Tucker back. At the height of Friday's success, he walked away from the role of Smokey, one of the most iconic characters in comedy history, and spent years saying almost nothing about why. Fans were left with rumors, speculation, and one question that never went away. So what made Chris Tucker leave Friday? And what conviction was powerful enough to make him turn his back on fame, money, and the role that made him unforgettable? Join us as we uncover the truth behind why Chris Tucker really left Friday. The kid who stole the whole movie. In 1995, nobody outside of comedy clubs in Los Angeles or Atlanta knew who Chris was. He was 23 years old, from College Park, Georgia, and had done a handful of small television appearances and a minor role in House Party 3. He was funny.
They ain't here. Oh, where the hell they at? Look, man, we had a meeting here. I ain't got time to wait, man. I gotta pick up money over here. I gotta pick money up here, man.
Anyone who saw him on stage knew that immediately. But funny in a comedy club and funny on a movie screen are two entirely different things, and Hollywood had not yet allowed Chris to prove he could pull off the second one. Ice Cube spent years pulling Friday together. He wrote the script with DJ Pooh, focusing on a single, random day in South Central Los Angeles, which involved two guys sitting on a porch.
Why you bringing up old shit?
Craig, I left my purse in your house. Can I go inside and get it?
Yeah, come on.
Surrounded by weird neighbors and the everyday mess that anyone from the area knows all too well. Ice Cube was already a massive star at the time, so credibility wasn't the issue. The real challenge was finding a co-star who could actually match his energy and make the scene feel authentic instead of staged. Ice Cube spotted Chris on Def Comedy Jam and locked it in right away. The high-pitched voice, the wild timing, and the unpredictability where nobody knew what was hitting next. Chris had the whole package. The studio executives, on the other hand, panicked. Executives wanted a safe, famous name to cover their rear ends on a low-budget movie with zero explosions and an unknown director. Ice Cube fought for him anyway, even paying out of pocket for Chris's travel expenses just to land the audition. Chris walked away with a total of $10,000 for creating an iconic character. Modern Hollywood pays 10 times that for lunch catering. What Chris pulled off on that porch was pure insanity. He barely stuck to the script and played Smokey with this wild, chaotic energy that felt like a train crash waiting to happen. But somehow he nailed every single punchline. He also had legendary chemistry between him and Ice Cube, which nobody wrote down on paper. It just happened because two guys were genuinely having fun on a set with zero money. Friday dropped in April 1995 and blew up instantly. People couldn't stop repeating every single line. The comedy was real and completely familiar to anyone who actually lived in neighborhoods. And Chris went from a complete nobody to a legend overnight with just one movie. It was as if Hollywood suddenly woke up and realized he was a gold mine. But just as the world was learning his name, Chris was already pulling back from the character that had introduced him as a star. And the reasons are deeper than anyone outside his inner circle knew. The offer nobody expected him to refuse. The call for a Friday sequel came almost immediately. The film had made back its modest budget several times over and had settled into a second life on home video and cable that kept expanding its audience. Studios love a hit they can replicate, and New Line Cinema was no exception. Ice Cube was ready. Fans were ready. The only person who apparently was not ready was the one everybody most wanted back. Ice Cube finally dropped the actual numbers after years of wild internet theories. The studio was completely ready to drop 10 to 12 million bucks just to get Chris back as Smokey in next Friday. That is not some made-up rumor from a forum. That is Ice Cube speaking directly on social media, shutting down fans who swore Chris got disrespected with a lowball offer. Nobody disrespected him. The check was real, the money was insane, and Chris still walked away from it, turning down $12 million just to avoid pretending to smoke fake weed on camera is a level of stubbornness most people will never understand. The media pushed a super clean story. Chris simply outgrew a cheap weed comedy. The Fifth Element was right around the corner. Giant studio checks were rolling in, and repeating the same role would cap his career before it even took off. That narrative was not totally fake. Career ambition played a role, but that was only part of the math, and he knew it, even if he kept his mouth shut at the time. $12 million in the year 2000 was serious money. That was retire forever, change the family tree cash. Turning down a paycheck like that takes something way beyond normal career logic. Almost nobody in Hollywood walks away from that kind of money unless something deeply personal is on the line. For Chris, something was wrong. It just took a long time for the real story to come out. Refusing $12 million over a weed joke is either peak moral integrity or pure insanity. Most people would play Smokey until age 80 for half that check. Ice Cube handled the situation like a professional. He confirmed the offer, confirmed it got rejected, and kept moving. He brought in Mike Epps to bring a different comedic energy for the sequels, and the franchise kept rolling. Meanwhile, Chris took an entirely different path that made that $12 million offer look like pocket change. But money and ambition only explain so much, and what Chris eventually admitted about his reasons had nothing to do with either. The line he decided not to cross. Chris was born and raised in the Church of God in Christ, a Pentecostal denomination with roots in the American South. Faith was embedded in his upbringing before fame was even a possibility. When he moved to Los Angeles to chase a comedy career, that background did not disappear. It went underground for a while, submerged beneath the momentum of a career that was accelerating faster than he had anticipated. Smokey stood for everything Pentecostal faith preaches against. The guy smoked weed on camera, talked trash, and threw around language that would get anyone kicked out of church. Chris played the role perfectly in 1995 with zero hesitation. The massive success of the movie changed everything, though. Once a cheap comedy turns into a massive cultural phenomenon, a character stops being just an acting job and turns into a permanent label. Chris eventually said it plainly in an interview with All Urban Central. He did not want to represent everybody smoking weed. He had watched Friday become a phenomenon and decided he did not want that to be his calling card forever. He reportedly said he had kind of forgotten about this part of his thinking because it had felt personal rather than professional at the time. It was not a calculated PR move. It was a private conviction that calcified into a decision. Ice Cube eventually cleared up the rest of the story after fans would not stop asking. Chris told the producers straight up that the cussing had to stop. The weed smoking on camera had to stop too. Faith took over his life, and playing Smokey suddenly did not fit with the person he wanted to be. Walking away from $12 million was definitely painful. Apparently, turning down a mountain of cash was still easier than spending months pretending to be a guy he could not stand looking at in the mirror anymore. And the action Chris took next would prove, beyond any reasonable doubt, that he had not miscalculated. The highest paid actor in Hollywood. Rush Hour hit theaters in September 1998 and completely flipped the script on Chris's career. Hollywood suddenly saw him in a whole new light. The movie paired him with Jackie Chan for a buddy cop comedy, built entirely around two massive personalities clashing on screen.
Please tell me you speak English. I'm Detective Carter. Do you speak any English?
Chris played Detective James Carter, a character who was loud, obnoxious, wildly overconfident, and impossible to look away from. Carter carried some of Smokey's frantic energy, but lived in a totally different world morally. Rush Hour pulled in over $244 million worldwide on a $33 million budget. That kind of box office return changes a career overnight. Chris Tucker made $3 million for the first movie. After the money started rolling in, he demanded $20 million for Rush Hour 2, putting him right alongside the biggest movie stars on the planet. Then came a two-picture deal worth $40 million with New Line Cinema, plus 20% of the gross on Rush Hour 3. By the time Rush Hour 3 hit screens in 2007, Chris was somehow the highest-paid actor on planet Earth. The guy who'd made $10 grand playing Smokey was now pulling $25 million for a single movie. He managed to pull off something almost impossible in show business. He stuck to his principles, took a temporary financial hit, and ended up wildly richer on the other side. The irony of Rush Hour making more cash than the whole Friday trilogy combined was not lost on anyone watching. Ice Cube built a solid franchise with those sequels. Chris took a totally different route that left a massive global footprint, powered by the kind of box office numbers that make studio executives sit up and take notes. Ice Cube built a legendary hood comedy empire, but Chris made enough international money yelling at Jackie Chan to buy a small country. Moral high grounds do not usually pay off, but when they do, the bank account looks ridiculous. But the financial story that came next was one that Chris's most enthusiastic fans wished they could rewrite for him. The debt nobody saw coming. After Rush Hour 3 in 2007, Chris's output slowed dramatically. The films stopped coming in the same volume. Years went by without a major release. Fans who had watched him climb from Smokey to James Carter to the highest billing in Hollywood suddenly found themselves scanning entertainment news for updates that were not there. The silence was puzzling. The scale of what he had built made the disappearance even harder to explain. When the explanation eventually emerged, it was financial. Reports indicated Chris had accumulated significant IRS debt across multiple tax years, with the total allegedly reaching approximately $14 million by 2014. Tax debt of that magnitude does not appear overnight. It builds over years of deferred payments and bad accounting, often accelerated by people who earn enormous sums in short windows and do not structure the back end carefully enough. Chris reportedly settled the debt, but it came after years of that liability hanging over everything he did. Real estate investments blew up in his face too. The discipline that made Chris turn down $12 million on principal apparently went out the window when it came to managing the hundreds of millions that rolled in later. Through the entire mess, Chris stuck to the same basic rule. He kept his mouth shut and did not beg for attention on cheap reality TV shows. He traveled the world and lived a quiet life built around religion instead of chasing clout. When Silver Linings Playbook dropped in 2012, viewers got a quick taste of the old energy. It was a nice little cameo, but definitely not a full-blown comeback. What Chris was allegedly doing during those years, according to people reportedly close to him, was something harder to quantify than a comeback. He was re-examining the relationship between his career and his identity. Fame had been his for a long time. Then it receded, and rather than scramble to recapture it at any cost, he had apparently chosen to wait for something that felt worth doing. What Chris was allegedly doing during those years, according to people reportedly close to him, was something harder to quantify than a comeback. He was re-examining the relationship between his career and his identity. Fame had been his for a long time. Then it receded, and rather than scramble to recapture it at any cost, he had apparently chosen to wait for something that felt worth doing. That patience would eventually bring him back to a conversation about Friday that neither he nor Ice Cube had fully finished. What Ice Cube confirmed. The Smokey questions simply never died. Every single interview eventually dragged Chris right back to the same spot. Would he ever come back? Did he hate Ice Cube? Did he regret walking away from the money? For decades, Chris gave the same polite, canned answer every time. He claimed he loved the character, appreciated what the movie did for his career, and might consider a fourth film if the script was good enough. It was a nice dodge that avoided hurting anyone's feelings, but it was nowhere near the full truth. In 2021, Chris sat down with All Urban Central.
But he kept moving, and he got Mike Epps, and they went and did another one, and it was great. He did two of them, and they were great.
And gave the most direct account of his thinking that fans had yet heard. The weed. The cultural image Smokey was projecting. The sense that he did not want to keep representing that character to a generation of viewers who had grown up treating Friday like a lifestyle document. He admitted he had kind of forgotten about that part of his reasoning because it had felt so personal at the time, not a calculated public position, just a private conviction that had quietly governed a very public decision. Ice Cube eventually spilled the rest of the details when fans kept pushing. The $12 million offer was real, and the money was sitting right on the table. Chris turned it down strictly over religion, not career strategy or contract disputes. Cube never showed any public bitterness over the whole thing. He even claimed he was glad Chris walked away because it gave Mike Epps a chance to steal the show in the sequels. That is an impressively nice spin on a situation that normally turns into a massive public feud. Chris actually started talking about a Fourth Friday movie recently with something resembling actual interest, instead of basic PR manners. He told reporters that a comeback cannot just be a lazy cash grab. The script needs to be solid, the timing needs to make sense, and the final cut has to respect what the original movie meant to fans. Nobody really knows what Chris and Ice Cube say to each other behind closed doors. Neither guy has ever leaked the real private conversations. Somehow, though, the public version of their relationship is free of the toxic drama that usually explodes during long Hollywood grudges. But the real weight of this story has always been less about what Chris walked away from and more about what his decision did to the Friday franchise and the fans who built their cultural identity around it. What is left of the legacy? The Friday franchise survived without Smokey. Next Friday found its audience. Friday After Next made over $33 million at the box office. Mike Epps stepped into the comedic vacuum and made it his own, winning over fans who had initially shown up only because of nostalgia.
I'm talking about a busload of them hoes if you can.
I was just gonna get drunk and watch The Grinch, so I'll be there. I'll get the address from y'all later.
Ice Cube kept building the world he had created in 1995 and found ways to make it work without the element that many people considered the most irreplaceable. And yet, Smokey's absence has never fully normalized. In every discussion of the Friday series, the question comes up. In every retrospective, someone notes what might have been. Ice Cube himself has said the door is still open and that he has a script ready if Chris ever makes the call. He has said he would consider it if the material were worth doing. Both men, 30 years later, are still having a version of the same conversation they started in 1999. That is either a testament to the enduring power of what they made together or a sign that the unfinished business between them has never quite resolved. Chris leaving Friday proved something that applies to pretty much any piece of pop culture that actually explodes. The exact magic that made the original work can never be recreated in a lab. Smokey was not just some script outline. He was a 23-year-old kid given zero money, zero rules, and free rein to go wild on camera. That entire performance worked because it was raw and unpredictable. A studio boardroom cannot just round up those exact circumstances, throw money at them, and pretend the magic comes back on command. At 54, Chris handles his own legacy with absolute silence. The guy feels zero need to defend his past choices. Religion gets no promotional sales pitch from him either. Through decades of interviews, the message stayed identical. The choice happened, the reasons were real, and zero time gets wasted looking backward. That mindset rarely exists in an industry run entirely on fake regret and desperate reinventions. His career turned out to be a strange example of what happens when someone values personal beliefs over pure corporate logic. Things actually worked out for him, even if the road was messy, expensive, and chaotic. Bad investments showed up, bank accounts took a hit, and long gaps between movies happened. Through all of that, his core identity stayed exactly where he placed it back in 1999, when he stared at $12 million and decided walking away was better than playing Smokey one more time. Whether a Fourth Friday ever gets made, or whether Chris and Ice Cube ever share a screen again, this much is no longer a mystery. Chris left Friday because of what he believed, not because of what he feared. And 30 years later, that is the kind of story that does not need a sequel to feel complete. One detour. Chris return for a Fourth Friday? Or has the moment passed? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.